Hi, it's Penny here, and today I wanted to talk about some fantasy books that have a big musical component to them. I'm going to start with ones where the music is just a big part of the world, and then move into ones where the music is more a part of the magic of the world and more a part of the plot. And as always, I love fantasy books that include music in them. So if you have any other recommendations, please leave them down in the comments because I want to know. So firstly, I think one of the most obvious ones to talk about would be The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. So this follows a young boy called Quoth who is raised amongst this performance theatre group that travel around giving performances. Then he's orphaned, and a big part of what happens when he's orphaned and just left out in the wilderness is that he has this lute. Honestly, I play modern instruments, not old ones, so I don't know, but he's playing, I want to say, a lute, and it's kind of what keeps his grip on reality, or maybe how he loses his grip on reality. And then eventually he goes to the university to try and learn magic, which he had some exposure to when he was young, and the way that he makes a living is very based around the music. And we are still waiting for the third book in this series, so I still think there's a chance that the musical part of the world might leak more into the magical side, but we will see. I don't think it's happened yet. It's been a while since I read the series, and I want to wait for the third book before I do a reread. And at this point, who knows when we'll get that third book. But if you want a fantasy world that has a lot of music in it, and the main character is a musician and spends a lot of time thinking about music and gets a lot out of music, and even the romance has like a musical element to it, like I still love the series, even though I'm disappointed that we haven't gotten the third book. And I still think you can read at least this first book and enjoy it without the rest of the series. Then I also want to mention the Dragons of Pern series by Anne McCaffrey. So in the Dragon of Pern series, every few hundred years, this thread will fall from the sky, and anything it touches, it destroys. Now the way that they survive is they have dragons which are able to burn the thread out of the sky before it touches the ground. Now, in the first book, because this hasn't happened in hundreds of years, people have kind of forgotten and stopped respecting the dragons and the dragon riders so much, and so they're quite unprepared for the impending thread fall. But also a big thing that's going on in this world is the Harpers. So in this world, the Harpers are the ones who play music and learn music, but they're also the ones responsible for education and spreading information. They do a bit of spying, and quite a few of the main characters in the series are Harpers, and the dragon riders and the Harpers often have an alliance and are working together to try and fix a lot of the world's problems. And I believe that Anne McCaffrey has a musical background herself. I haven't researched this. I should have. Maybe editing me will do that. Because I think some of the characters in her other series have musical backgrounds as well. Like, I'm just remembering now that I think I have it like here. The Crystal Singer series, the main character also has a musical background. That's another series I need to reread because I've forgotten how much music is a part of it. But who knows, maybe it fits on this list as well. Anyway, let's get into ones now where the music is more a part of the magic. So some of these, the music is less a part of the world, but it does have a place in the magic. Firstly, I want to talk about the Lock and Key series. So this is a graphic novel series where this family has a traumatic experience, and so they move back to the family house, this big fancy house that has these magical keys hidden all through it. And each of the keys works in a different way, but there are a couple of musical ones. Primarily, there is the music box key. So this has a music box that goes with it. You put the key into the music box, and while the music is playing, you can tell other people to do things and they will do them. So it's a kind of mind control. It doesn't really get too much into how the music works or anything like that, but it's still music in the magic, so I think it's my favorite key. One of my favorite keys. I always like the idea of mind control anyway, and it feels like music in real life is almost mind control, right? Then we have The Monsters of Verity Duology by B.E. Schwab. You can see this one has a violin on the front because our main character August does play the violin. So in this world, basically violent acts result in the creation of a monster, and different kinds of violent acts give you different types of monsters. So we have the Corsai and the Malachi, which are more like vampires, and then we also have the Sunai. So our main character August is a Sunai, and with them every now and then they go dark, and the longer they go without going dark, the more they struggle. And I think it shows on their skin, but when they go dark, basically they use music to suck people's souls out of them. So each one of these Sunai, there's only 3 of them because the kind of violent act that leads to them existing is quite rare, but they each play an instrument and they kind of treat each other like family. So August really would like to be human. Unfortunately, he has this problem where every now and then he has an urge to play his violin and suck out people's souls, which is kind of getting in the way of his life. Also, I guess in this story we have two sides of the town. One where the Sunai live and the leader there is really trying to keep things peaceful and under control. And then the other side where the leader has just like embraced violence and has all these monsters under his control. And the daughter of that leader really wants to be as monstrous as her father. So we kind of have August, who's a monster who wants to be a human. And then we have this human girl who wants to be more of a monster. But there's a little bit of a musical element in there. Okay, then we have what is probably my first exposure to music as magic in a fantasy world, and that is the Valdemar series. Actually, also one of the first adult YA, maybe YA, adult fantasies that I ever read, and I really appreciate everything that series taught me. So in the world of Valdemar, there's a few things going on. Primarily, we have, actually, I have this book here. So there are these magical white horses. They're known as companions, and they go around and select people usually with some kind of magical ability to become heralds, and the heralds go around being the good guys, saving the day, basically working for the throne and trying to stop bad shit from happening. So the heralds are trained up in kind of the royal, what is the word? I don't know. The royal castle's there, and then there's 3 schools also in that area. We have the place where the heralds are trained. We also have a school where it's mostly nobles or really smart people being trained. And then we have the Bardic Collegium, also where people learn to be bards. Because in this world, bards are very valued, again, like with the Dragons of Pern series, for spreading information and education. But also, there is a magical element because there are 3 bardic gifts. I think one is creation, one is just like musical talent, being able to play music, and then the last one is also being able to influence people's emotions using music. So the one I have here is from the Storms trilogy. This is part of like a bunch of trilogies that join together, but actually I think the most musical of the characters from Valdemar would be Vaniel. Vaniel's trilogy is set kind of earlier in time. He is raised by a man who really just wants him to be like a very manly man, leader of his business. I think they do horse trading. Anyway, instead he just wants to play his lute and be an emo kind of guy. His father really doesn't like that, and he is abused as a result. He ends up going to stay with his auntie, who is a herald, and along the way gets involved with the heralds and also the bards. Then there's a whole traumatic love story. Maybe look at trigger warnings for like suicide, homophobia, sexual abuse. But I did really like the story. I'm a little bit scared to go back and read Mercedes Lackey books because I read them when I was so much younger and I love them so much. But would I love them now that I'm a lot older? I don't know. But again, Mercedes Lackey has a musical background herself, and so she often includes characters who are musicians in her stories. Then next we have a series which actually I used to own and I got rid of it, and now I regret it, which is why I'm always a little bit scared to unhaul things even if I think I don't like them, because maybe future me would like them and then be annoyed that I used to own it and I got rid of it. But anyway, next series I wanted to talk about is the Spell Song Cycle by L.E. Modesitt Jr., who also wrote the Saga of Recluse. So in the Spell Song series, it's a portal fantasy. We have this woman, I think she's an opera singer, and she ends up going through this portal, ending up in this magical world where singing and music have magic in the world, and you're able to use it to create things. What I like about L.E. Modesitt Jr. is he tries to be very realistic in the worlds he creates. It does mean that sometimes he will focus on a lot of details that maybe not everyone would be interested in, but if you want a fantasy world that's fully developed, has a proper economy, and like looks at the proper logistics of ruling a kingdom, in this particular case, ruling a kingdom using music and singing as a creative force, then this has all of that. I always like magic systems where there is a cost to the magic. So this is one where she learns that whenever she uses singing to create things, she really has to make sure that she's feeding herself well and taking care of herself, or otherwise she won't be able to do it. And she also learns a lot about like the economic effects of the different things that she does. This is another one where I haven't read it in a long time and I would like to reread it. If only I still owned it. I wonder if there's audiobooks. I wonder if the audiobooks would have singing in it. But anyway, music and singing writing is the central magic of this world. So if you want a musical magic system, then this is it. Then lastly, I want to talk about the Books of the Faeries series by Maggie Stiefvater. Now, I will admit this is a series that isn't complete, and I know in another video I did recently, I also talked about a bunch of series that aren't complete, and I recommended them. I have to say this one I don't ever think will be complete. Maggie Stiefvater has said basically that her writing style has changed too much, that she wouldn't be able to write this third book in the way that it's written anymore, and I think that's true. These are kind of like Twilight with fairies, but that's going to give you completely the wrong idea, because the fairies here are much more like mythological fairies rather than sexy fairies. But these are YA novels and there is romance. But what I love about this is the way that the fairies basically are able to draw power from the creativity, or the musical creativity, of these young people. So in this first book we have this young girl, and there is this assassin for the fairy world trying to kill her because of her potential power in the fairy world. Yes, it leads to romance. And then we have the second book, which I actually loved even more. This one follows the first girl's best friend, who was a boy who really was in love with her and then kind of got friend-zoned and was quite upset about it. And I love the way that he learns that his perspective of that is kind of not the best. As well, he meets this fairy woman and they have a romance, of course. But in this one, so he is at this special music school that they were both kind of applying to in the first book. And this music school has a big connection to the fairies, because the fairies are always drawn to the creativity of the students at the school. And it gets quite dark in bits. And I really loved it. I'm not sure it will be for everyone, because you do have to get through the YA romance of it, which maybe you'll love, maybe you won't. But I also would say, even though the third book in this series doesn't exist, you don't really need it. Like, each of these stories can almost stand alone. I mean, you want to read Lament before you read Ballad, but they both kind of wrap everything up. So if you want a bunch of music school students getting involved with fairies, then this is it. So those are all the fantasy books that I found on my shelves that have musical elements in them. Please let me know what other books you know that have musical magic in them. I would love to read them. I'd love to talk with you about any of them, any of the books I've talked about, or any other suggestions you have down in the comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.